It is late March 2026, and the race for the Ballon d'Or, football's most prestigious individual award, is completely wide open. The absolute grip Lionel Messi and Cristiano Ronaldo once held on the trophy has ended, leaving a massive power vacuum at the top of the sport. Looking at the predictions flooding social media and betting markets, a clear pattern emerges. Forecasters often look at the top scorers in Europe's major leagues and assume the player with the most domestic goals is the inevitable winner. That assumption ignores a critical change in how the governing body operates. The Ballon d'Or is no longer judged over a full calendar year. The voting block of 100 international journalists now evaluates players strictly on their performance during the 2025-2026 European club season. Because the evaluation window closes in the summer, voters are heavily influenced by the season's conclusion. Early season hat tricks against lower table teams carry a less weight than the high-stakes matches played between April and July, specifically the Champions League knockouts and the 2026 World Cup. Basing an analysis solely on weekly league statistics fails to account for how voters prioritize these high-leverage moments. In a season that ends with a World Cup in North America, domestic consistency serves as the baseline, but the international stage provides the eventual winner's margin. To accurately predict the 2026 winner, we need a framework that tracks two distinct axes. The x-axis measures a player's club statistical dominance, while the y-axis tracks their national team World Cup odds. In the bottom right quadrant sits a player like Erling Haaland. He produces massive goal-scoring numbers for Manchester City, but his chances are limited because he plays for Norway, a national team that rarely contends for the final stages of a major international tournament. The top right quadrant contains players like Kylian Mbappé and Lamine Yamal. Their club statistics might not always match Haaland's raw volume, but they play for France and Spain, heavyweights expected to reach the final weeks of the World Cup. History shows that voters overwhelmingly favor players who occupy this specific corner of the matrix. The winners almost always come from this high probability zone, while the rest of the chart is effectively filtered out by the jury. A player's geographical starting point on this matrix dictates their realistic ceiling. Their national team's depth and tournament history carry more predictive weight than their weekly scoring rate in a domestic league. The voting process is strictly governed by three official criteria confirmed by the governing body. Journalists are required to score players against these specific rules rather than personal preference. The first criterion is individual performances, focusing on goals, assists, and match-winning displays. While this guarantees a shortlist spot, the second criterion, team achievements, is the ultimate multiplier for major trophies. The third, fair play, functions merely as a tiebreaker. This chart shows the correlation between World Cup winners and Ballon d'Or winners over the last 30 years. The data confirms that international hardware consistently overrides domestic scoring titles when the two come into conflict. In the mind of the average voter, the prestige of international success carries a psychological weight that pure league statistics simply cannot match. Applying these rules isolates the few players who offer the most reliable path to victory. The most prominent example is Kylian Mbappé. Mbappé satisfies Rule 1 with elite output in La Liga and the Champions League. He leads the French national team as captain, securing a direct route to the trophy multiplier. However, because his baseline expectations are so high, voters may be less impressed by standard excellence. Mbappé effectively needs a Champions League or World Cup final appearance to avoid being viewed as an underachiever by the jury. Vinícius Jr. offers a similar dual-threat profile. He excels in the Champions League knockouts, but his candidacy depends on translating club success to a Brazilian team searching for consistent identity. Declan Rice presents a more specialized case. Defensive midfielders rarely win this award, but Rice anchors an Arsenal side contending for the Premier League and an England squad favored for the World Cup, allowing him to accumulate massive credit under Rule 2. These three players are considered the most reliable analytical picks because they possess realistic potential to trigger the team achievement multiplier in club and international competitions. The most significant outlier in 2026 is 18-year-old Lamine Yamal. Voters are often influenced by the possibility of a historic first. The narrative of crowning the youngest winner in the award's history gives Yamal a psychological advantage that can outweigh minor statistical gaps. His main hurdle is Barcelona's performance in the Champions League. If the club exits the tournament early, Yamal loses the primary platform needed to maintain his momentum before the World Cup begins. Yamal's narrative-driven path stands in contrast to the statistical dominance of Harry Kane. Kane leads the European scoring charts for Bayern Munich and maximizes the Rule 1 criteria better than any other forward in the game right now. Yet Kane's high individual scoring will likely struggle against Yamal's historic narrative in the voting room, unless England can secure the World Cup trophy in July. Predicting the winner requires a timeline from May to July. The first node is the Champions League final, where the winning club's standout establishes an early lead. The second node is the World Cup final, which definitively overrides the club season to decide the award. Forecasters should look past players whose candidacy is built entirely on club-level scoring volume. Those stats provide the foundation for the shortlist, but they rarely survive the summer. Accurate forecasting requires focusing on players who occupy both sides of the success equation, those whose clubs are Champions League favorites and whose national teams are expected to reach at least the World Cup semifinals. The 2026 Ballon d'Or gravitates toward players who master the timing of the season. It rewards those who leverage domestic stability into a deep international run, where legacy is defined in the final weeks of July.